You're listening to IHC's podcast. Today's topic is Culture is Medicine.
Hi folks, welcome to the IHC podcast where culture meets community. My name is Marissa Hemstreet, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm from the Canyoncito Band of Navajos. I'm the communications coordinator for the Indian Health Center and your host for the IHC podcast. At the Indian Health Center Santa Clara Valley, where we provide medical, dental, counseling, WIC, and prevention services to over 23,000 members while specializing in the unique healthcare and needs of American Indians and Alaska Natives. Today, we're here with Ash. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi y'all, my name is Ash. Wakiin Frandsen, and I use all pronouns. I'm with the Karuk Nation up in the Klamath Falls region.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know it's been, like you were sharing with me earlier, that it's been a busy month, in June and August here in San Jose. It's our Pride Month, and it's really just it sets our city apart because, Pride celebrations usually normally take place in June in other cities. And so this special time allows us to honor the unique cultural identity of Two-Spirit individuals and other folks along the queer spectrum to highlight their invaluable contributions to our community. So thank you, and we're appreciative that you're here today.
Yeah, I'm always happy to come out and both represent our queer folks, but also our Two-Spirit folks that are often otherwise ignored. I feel like we're often erased, and I think there's a lot of work being done to really shift that narrative and bring us back into the limelight. So anytime I can do that, I'm always honored to do so.
Yeah, and this year I've seen that big shift with folks not referring to the queer community as LGBTQIA, then 2S for Two-Spirit at the end. Now I see that shift in the mindset and then even in labeling of things where it's 2S, LGBTQIA, and then the other acronyms.
Yeah, actually in the Q Corner, which is the LGBTQ Wellness Center within the county, when you walk straight up to the doors, to the right of the door, it says 2S LGBTQIA+. Mm-hmm. And really being very intentional on that we are on Native land, that we are honoring the people of this land that we originally come from, and really making sure that those folks have a front row seat versus being way in the back. Mm-hmm. And then completely ignored and then thrown under a bus a few times, which is culturally what has happened since colonialism. And I think our team really focuses on switching those narratives and really empowering folks that are otherwise often left out and underserved.
Yeah, and I really appreciate seeing that more and more coming into fruition with, like you were saying, with the rebranding of things, even just updating flyers. People don't understand how empowering that is as a Two-Spirit person to see those things and be I'm represented here. So.
Yeah, I think folks in general, no matter who you are, you want to be seen, you want to be loved, and you want to be heard. And for some of us, we're not seen, right? Mm-hmm. We don't see representation in media. We don't see representation in the arts as much. We don't see representation in characters, let alone in services. And so at least, for both my team at the Q Corner and then other parts of my life, really making sure that we are at the front of the pack. We're really making sure to be able to be seen. Even in the center's art, if you look around the room, mm-hmm. we have several different paintings that are done by Indigenous folks and then are representing Two-Spirit folks. And so being very, again, intentional that when you walk in, you're able to see pieces of yourself. You're able to feel more connected in community. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that without representation.
Yeah, and I can say as a Two-Spirit person, it feels nice to be seen. So thank you so much. Can you share a little bit about what you do at the Q Corner? I know you wear many hats, as we were talking about earlier.
Yes, I do wear many hats. So I'm the community outreach specialist for the collective. Like I said, the Q Corner is the Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ Wellness Center within the county. And so it includes the drop-in center, peer-led support groups, peer-led support within the drop-in center. So that could look like you're in crisis and you don't know how to, do your name change paperwork, and you come in, we sit with you and we help you with that paperwork. It may look like you just want connection, right? You're looking for friends, you want to, find some joy in community, and so you're hanging out with us and we're playing games. We kind of serve so many different things and help navigate folks through the county system, which is also so very confusing most of the time. Mm-hmm. We also have the Gender Affirming Care Clinic, which is a specialty mental health clinic, as far as we know, the first of its kind, mm-hmm. that serve trans and gender diverse folks who have Santa Clara Medi-Cal or are uninsured. And so they get one-on-one therapy, relational therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, and peer support through that as well. And we have a harm reduction program that really focuses on low barrier access to substance use care. So that can look like, free Narcan, how to use Narcan, fentanyl testing strips. It can also look like really meeting that person where they're at and being able to help them provide more wellness within their own journey within substance use. And then we have an amazing training team that really focuses on creating trainings that can further mental health workers in their own journey on being able to serve folks within the queer community. So we do all the things. I like to joke that we're like the queer Costco. We have all the things. And if we don't have it, we know who does, and we point people in the right direction. And then my job is really being able to talk about those services, making sure people are coming into the doors, and then serving the folks when they walk in. And we serve all ages. We don't charge. There's, our services are free, and we really make sure to find ways to fill in the gaps that aren't there. So things like having a Two-Spirit lunch that we partner with Indian Health Center so that folks have a safe place to come in. They're able to eat. They're able to be in community and spend time in that space afterwards, mm-hmm. Connecting to other services in the area. Being real intentional about peer support groups, making sure that we're, serving folks with disabilities, serving the Asian community, serving the BIPOC community, really, again, being intentional of providing that care. And then even with our team, when you look around, we have so many different expressions and people in their own journey that often, we're so diverse, even as a team, that there's kind of somewhere in there that people can start seeing themselves mm-hmm. Within the team that they work with, which also I think is just amazing, because I think for some folks, they don't feel seen. They're often not being served, by people within, the queer community. And so then being able to actually have a mental health professional, right, that is trans, mm-hmm. That is Two-Spirit, or is Southeast Asian, whatever the case may be, we really try to have such a diversity in the folks that we're working with, mm-hmm. To provide some really holistic wellness in the space.
Yeah, and most recently I got to attend the Q Corners grand opening ceremony, which was this past Friday, August 9th.
Yeah.
I have to remember dates. And it was a really good opening. It was kind of like a little maze where we had to go through, and you learn about the different services, and it's really nice to continue to learn about the different things that I didn't know you had a library. I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, even with our library, we made sure to buy all the books that are banned. We made sure to research and find folks that are queer authors, that the information they're writing on the characters also have people in community. We have stuff for all ages, mm-hmm. and then we even have a whole section just for clinicians. So mm-hmm. clinicians that are struggling, they know that they lack the information to serve our community, and so they often are coming to us for extra education, coming in, doing consult groups with part of our team as well. And so we actually have a whole part of the library that's just for them, mm-hmm. All clinical books.
Nice, yeah, and even seeing the gender affirming garments that you all have, it was interesting to learn about those, and we even had the opportunity during the tour to touch a sample of them just to see what they felt like. Yeah. I was interested in the chest binder. I was like, that's so interesting, and I was like, let me see what this is, and I was like, wow, you could feel why or how that type of fabric would work. It's very thick and you're not
sturdy,
going nowhere.
Yeah. A lot of folks, they either can't afford binders, they're super expensive, or they don't know how to properly fit themselves, so they'll get something too big or they'll get them something too small. That can also cause different health issues if it's too tight, because you're constricting your capacity to breathe if it's too tight. Or folks are young or don't have that income for it, right? And so one of the things that we really make sure, like, folks can come in, they get sized there, they can try it on, they get them for free. We teach them how to care for the garment, how to wear them, when the best time is to take it off. And then for either younger folk or folk who don't have transportation, we will actually deliver it. So it's not uncommon for a junior hire to email us, is really struggling, can't access our services, and we'll get some information, we'll create a care package, and we'll drop it off at their school office for them to be able to still access the garment. And I personally had never worn a binder, and so I was giving them out. So often I was like, well, it's kind of hard to talk about something you've not necessarily always used, and so I wore one for an entire week just to see what it felt like, you know. And it really gave me kind of like hands-on tools, and that's kind of just my own process. It makes it easier for me to be able to talk about it. But even having the gas for tacking, and then we also have trans tape, which some people prefer. It seems like a lot of people don't because it's more sticky, but like having those things that people can access for free just makes a huge difference on community. And then when people come in, some don't even know they exist. Like they've never heard of it. And so then, you know, when they're having, you know, really struggling in their body and their clothing and feeling real disconnected, you know, in that conversation, it's really great to be able to take them back and be like, hey, have you, you know, tried binding or tucking? You know, do you want to look at this? And they can feel it, and then they'll go try it on, and often they'll come back and they'll be like, you know, just lighting up, like feeling much more embodied, and then they're able to come back every 6 months to be able to receive new garments.
Yeah, just like the name says, it's gender affirming, so
yeah,
it makes sense. I probably would have some type of dysmorphia wearing one for myself.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh no, where'd they go?
Right? Totally different for me. Like, you know, even, you know, being two-spirit, and for me, like, as a two-spirit person, I think that term can mean something different for other folks, but for me, it's like, you know, from a traditional sense, I see myself more like energy. I am like a Wakiin chanupa. I am masculine and feminine, and it's perfect, like a connection and balance, right? And so my experience with my body is different than some folks who are gender diverse, right? Like, I'm comfortable within the body that I was born in, but that's not the case for many. So it was interesting wearing the binder for a week, because I did have like a very dysphoric like feeling, like I didn't feel as embodied for me. But that also gave me just like a different level of like empathy and understanding that for somebody who, you know, does have, you know, a larger chest, right? And they do want a more masculine look, how they feel every day without the binder. And so it was an interesting choice that like provided more information than I realized. Like at the time I was just like, oh, I wonder what this feels like so I can talk about it. And then I kind of gained more information like from it, like the experience.
That's awesome. And I'm glad, well, I'm happy to hear that you didn't just want to talk about the garments and you wanted to like learn about them, and so you took that into your own hands and you tried binding your chest for a week and just how that felt. So,
yeah,
that's nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know it's like how you were saying that you feel comfortable in your body as you are, and for a lot of people that's not the experience. So it's really nice to hear some like insights about what it's like to use a binder, what it's like to like feel uncomfortable either in it or without it, and so you can really empathize with folks who just don't feel comfortable in their bodies. Yeah. So earlier you mentioned your tribe. So how does Indigenous culture influence our understanding of identity, particularly when it comes to being a two-spirit or queer?
I think that is a very layered question, and I thought about that question a little bit, because if you look at the roots of our culture and you know, look at, like, for instance, so often we hear Aho Matakyasin, right, which means all life is sacred, all life is connected, and you take that teaching, whether, you're trans or you're, cis, or whether you're queer or whether you're straight, by default that teaching you are, deeply connected. You are sacred. However, I think through colonialism and then humans just being humans, we are very far removed from often embodying some of the teachings, right? Historically, within tribal, society, Two-Spirit folks not only were often highly regarded, but they were usually the medicine people. So they had specialty roles, right? And they were honored in their mix of masculine and feminine, and were seen to have more capacity to see through the darkness, so to speak, right? And be able to provide counsel and intercession within ceremonies. Even Two-Spirit folks would be in ceremony before the folks would go out and hunt in different tribes within our nations. But I can't say that's how we are seen today, right? Most of our ceremonies have become extremely binary, right? Male, female. You go into an inipi, also known as a sweat lodge. The males sit on this side, the women sit on this side. You have this, clothing for men. You have this clothing for women, right? And so, for folks, and again, Two-Spirit kind of being broad, it could, include sexuality, it can include gender. For me, being Two-Spirit, it includes my gender. I'm gender diverse. And then also I identify as queer, which just means in general I don't fit in the box. Who I date, how I show up, I'm just a mixed bag of tricks. For some folks, Two-Spirit may just be talking about their sexuality. So being identified, being, female assigned at birth, and then identifying as female, being told to wear a skirt and sit in a certain space is not going to affect that person, right? But for a Two-Spirit person, that includes that gender diverse portion, right, or being trans. Those binary systems in ceremony are super impactful to the point that most folks don't show up in ceremony anymore. And to me, so much of my culture is about being in ceremony. It's about walking in a good way. It's about being able to pray next to my people, right? And so I think that's what's hard about that question. So we could go down to our roots, right? But we're so far removed from our roots. We're deeply removed. And so for me, I am a sun dancer. I sun dance as a woman because there's no space for me, right? There's the male side, there's the women's side, there's the male lodge, there's the female lodge. Even in lineup, males go first, women go afterwards. In that lineup, right? I still have the men ahead of me. And I'm a senior dancer, so I end up in the very front of the pack of women. So for me in my brain, right, I'm right in the middle where it should be. But that's not necessarily the case, right? I am identified the entire time as a woman dancer. And in my brain, as they're saying it, I am a Two-Spirit dancer, right? And so it's creating that space for me. And for me, being in ceremony in that space where I would say is not uplifting of my Two-Spirit identity, right? It's actually can be very difficult. My regalia, if you look at it, one set is all rainbow and the other one is all trans colors. So I fly those prayers for the Two-Spirit people that they may be able to be seen, they may be in community safely, and that they will be able to pray in a sacred way safely as they are, honored as they are. Because even when you drive into sun dances, there's always a sign: women in skirts, no drugs, no women on their moon, right? Those are the first things that you're seeing, right? And so a person who maybe they're trans mask, right? But they don't have passing privilege, so they're more visually seen as a woman. They're going to get hit with, where's your skirt, right? And so think of that person who's getting hit, where's your skirt? And they're like, that's not who I am. Now they're terrified. And then they either need to leave, deal with a whole lot of pressure, not wearing a skirt and being maybe misidentified, or wear a skirt and can you be in your body, can you be in your prayer while you're in that arbor? You know, for me, I don't have that same feeling, but that it is often difficult. And so sometimes when I am like in that ceremony, I remind myself like I am creating space for the young ones behind me, right? I am dancing for Two-Spirit folks. I am showing them that they can still hold their space, like in community, in leadership. And I will say there's been points where I'm like, why am I doing this, right? In this way anyways. And I'll have little ones come up to me and they'll have just gotten their first like gender affirming haircut, right? And they'll be like, hey, Ash, you know, I'm going by blank name and I'm using they, them pronouns. And like, but they've been seeing me dance since they were like a toddler, right? And I'm like that visual, like we are here, we are alive. And it's also one of the reasons why I have a Two-Spirit lodge that I pour, because I think it's deeply important for Two-Spirit folks to be able to be in ceremony, but be in ceremony like in an embodied way. So like, and I tell folk when they come like I put out like, you know, if you identify as women, please wear a long skirt and shoulders covered, you know, mask, shorts, and covered modestly, which, you know, I don't want people coming in naked. It's not that, we ain't that flexible on our rules, but I really emphasize like you're, you know, please dress in the way that you identify so that you may be able to be embodied while you pray. And then I explain to folks, please do not assume that this is how this is going to run. Each you know, lodge leader is different, and these protocols are very different than you are going to find anywhere else. And that's not to say every lodge leader like is very hard on those protocols, but I would say the majority are, right? Like this is where you sit, this is what you wear, and I honor those traditions, but I do make space for folks to be in ceremony within community without the pressure or fear of, you know, what they're wearing, and are they going to be, you know, have the aunties yell at you, because you know aunties, they like to yell at you. I usually get yelled at because I have cleavage happening. They're like, cover up. So I guess that's like kind of a very long-winded way of answering, because I know what the roots are and I know what my connection are to those teachings. You know, the songs that we sing, like what they are saying. But I've had to do a lot of work to pull out the like gender binaries that our society have attached, which to me is very deeply, you know, colonialistic, you know. But you can't get away from that, right? You can't get away from elders that, you know, don't know, and they live on the res, and you know what I mean? Like they don't have, like for a lot of folks, I am the first like educational conversation on this, like you know, when they them pronouns come up, like everybody's coming to me, right? Like, and
like you're the spokesperson.
I am the spokesperson. My chanupa has like, you know, rainbow on it and stuff, and you know, there's like different things. I just you know, become that go-to person, but there are also moments where like, you know, when your medicine man is saying like, you know, XYZ on protocol, like I'm not going to go head to head with that person. I'm going to respect them because that is my culture too, right? Yes. Like, so it's very, you know, mixed, but I deeply, you know the roots that we came from, and I believe that through showing up, through continuing to be in leadership, and being mindful of the politics of working with elders, right? And like how I show up when I choose to have those conversations and push back, that work is creating space for, you know, young ones that maybe haven't even been born yet, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for leading that charge, continuing to lead that charge, and also giving folks kind of like expectations to have like for your specific Two-Spirit Sweat Lodge, but then also just reminding them like, hey, like this is a safe space, but maybe some other lodges that you go to, they may not have the same protocol, and I would just want you to be mindful of that, to like well, one, protect your peace, and then also just be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really nice to hear. And I think you hit like how does your culture influence your understanding of like Two-Spirit and queer identity, also the cultural norms. And when you're speaking about how a lot of indigenous tribes, like currently today, because we're so far removed from our culture, that they are colonized and they have colonistic ideas. And part of that is, like, for me, it's from Navajo Nation, specifically Canincito Band of Navajos. Shout out to Hajli. That on Navajo Nation, we have one of the biggest Two-Spirit powwows in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But on Navajo Nation, it's also still illegal for gay marriage. Gay marriage is still illegal in Navajo Nation. And I'm just like, that's ridiculous. How are we going to have one of the biggest Two-Spirit powwows, one of the biggest, like, we have a organization called Navajo Pride.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's like queer Navajo Nation folks, and like they're great folks. I've worked with them in community, and we had Geronimo Louie come and speak with our Two-Spirit group, and just his understanding of what Two-Spirit is and how he identifies. And it was like a great conversation. But then we also did touch on like the politics in different tribal nations, and just how while we've made so much progress and we're being super visible, it doesn't always like land with like even different tribal governing bodies.
Right.
And so that's been a hard part. But I mean, the best that we can do, like you were saying, is for future generations, be that person, be that example of, oh, I can exist here, and like I do have a place.
Yeah.
So thank you for continuing to make space and be that person for folks who are our youth who are growing up now and saying like, hey, these are my pronouns, and this is like you were saying, their gender affirming haircut. And I'm just like, that's so cool. Like, I never even, there's so many things that I don't think about just because of how I identify for myself and like the body that I feel comfortable living in. For a while when I was middle school or elementary, did not feel comfortable in my body. I had that like gender dysphoric like couple of years. And on one of our few podcasts ago, I think it was for June, because June for Indian Health Center, we did Men's Health Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. And so I got to speak with Rain Liska. He is from, I think he's Hopi Nation. I'm so sorry, Rain, if you're not Hopi. I swear he is, though. But he was sharing like his cultural norms and just how he, growing up, didn't totally feel super in alignment with being a male-identified person. And I was like, I feel you. When I was younger, again, did not feel great. But then we both had that like awkward stage, and then and now we're more comfortable in both of our bodies. But still, that doesn't always translate for other folks. And it's just this weird time in your youth, and no matter however you identify your gender expression, any of that.
Preteens,
yes,
it's awkward. I got 2 11-year-olds, and woo, it's like a ball of awkward. I just hold on tight, and I think that's one of the things I try to remind people is like, we all know like what it's like to not be embodied. Like we all know, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not, like I have light skin privilege. And so like I have the weird experience of sometimes feeling like I'm too dark here, but then I'm too light here, right? Like, and being mixed, and like being mixed and Two-Spirit is just really fun. When you're on the rest, it's really great.
Oh yeah,
it's a wonderful experience that nobody ever, but like, I kind of, when people get like really anxious about gender and gender expression and trying to figure out the difference between gender and sexuality, and they're all in their head, I sometimes slow down to like just like these like areas that we all can identify, right? Like the reasons are different, right? And like the impact I think is different socially, but like just like trying to slow people down to like remembering those feelings so that they can connect with the information, like the why. It's important, right, to acknowledge people's pronouns, acknowledge people's heritage, acknowledge like people as they are, so they can feel seen and embodied. I think as humans, we just sometimes really make things more complicated than they need to be, which I often feel like also in ceremony when they start pulling certain protocols. I'm like, I'm sorry, you just said walk in a good way and in your body be in your prayer, but then you're now saying do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, how does that? But again, humans.
Yes.
Like we're always trying to learn and figure things out. And I feel like sometimes ceremony, if anything, is like like there's so much pressure while you're in ceremony, there's so much energy, and then like human experiences that like all this stuff comes up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a great place to work out conflict, internally or externally.
Conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
How has your own like Indigenous heritage shaped your understanding of yourself and your journey in the LGBTQ community?
A lot of things, actually. I had a lot of gender dysphoria growing up, both within my body. I would say more leaning towards trans masc for a lot of my life, and that really feeling like that it was like splitting me. I was in the wrong body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also mixed, so half my family is white, half my family is native. So like I don't quite look like anybody. I'm like not white enough for these folk over here. I'm considered the brown one. But these people over here, I am white, right? Like there was so much that like really like deeply impacted like my sense of being in my body, being connected to the earth and the land beneath me, being connected to other people.
Mm-hmm.
That I really think it was through my Indigenous heritage and ceremony, which I'll always kind of go back to because so much of it I think we've been removed from, like our rights and ability to pray, right? And how we pray. It was really, I think at like 17, I wasn't out yet. I came out at 18. And so at 17, I was using a lot of substances. I was homeless. And doing a lot of those things that we do while we're homeless to be able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I landed with one of my uncles in a lodge. And I can't tell you that I remember a lot. They say to be sober when you go into an inipi, and I definitely was not. So for all those who have walked into ceremony under the influence seeking something, just know that you're loved. I was definitely one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
And but there was something that happened, even though I can't tell you a lot about the experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was something that shifted, and I started seeking going into ceremony. I started seeking those family members that I was kind of disconnected from.
Mm-hmm.
And through like ceremony, right? Like being in the lodge, like you can't see anybody, but you can't even see yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I'm not male, I'm not female, I'm not, I wasn't the drug addict, I wasn't this, I wasn't that. I was just like deeply held, right,
Mm-hmm.
on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And like things would get quiet in my brain. And in that silence, I was able to start finding pieces of me I didn't even know were missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I could start feeling like my heart in connection as the drum was going,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we were singing.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience with that, it actually helped me like connect to my body. Like I said earlier, like I am a walking Januba, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am both masculine and feminine connected,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like the sacred teachings of those pipes. And as a pipe holder, I carry a lot of those teachings because I'm a big nerd like that. But being able to like remove like what I look like, what your concept of what I look like is,
Mm-hmm.
whether I'm white enough, native enough, like female, male, like all of that, like removing all of that and
Mm-hmm.
just simply being like in my body, in my energy, connected to people, next to me, connected to the winged ones, the two-legged, the four-legged, the creepy collies, like the ground underneath me,
Mm-hmm.
Like being in ceremony helped me start stripping all those things away,
Mm-hmm.
right? And being able to just accept myself in any particular moment as I was, and really just going, am I walking in a good way? Am I causing myself harm? Am I causing you harm? And if those are a no, we're good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so through like my culture and through ceremony, I really was like, yeah, I'm totally queer. I do not fit in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Like generally, I am also engaged to, a femme presenting non-binary person. I have 2 kids with an ex-wife,
Mm-hmm.
like I have lots of queer things, but really being able to like connect to like my heritage, my culture, my body, myself, like within that coming out process. And it's all deeply intertwined, right? So like for some people it's, how they present, they look like, how they sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, it's really been so much more like energetic, right? Like, because I really do have very like my energy is kind of big. It's like masculine, it's feminine. I'm like mama bear, but I'll tear your face off. You know what I mean? Like it's all of these things. And it was really through ceremony and some of those teachings, right? Those teachings of the coyote, the teachings of the wolf medicine, the teachings of these various things that aren't like male or female, right? That like started like, I'm like, oh, I connect to that, and just start kind of stripping away some of that. And so even my experience within like, you know, the 2S LGBTQIA plus community is different, right? You know, for some of them, they love labels, right? They love labels, and there's so many labels. And my kid is one of those people who love labels. My kid loves labels. They're all the things, right? And it brings them joy. But for me, it's the absence of labels, right? It is the being human and living and connected and no better or worse than the tree next to me, right? Like, and that's been like my experience. Maybe I sat with too many elders. I don't know. Maybe it was too hot in the lodge. I fried some of my brain. But like even in community, some of it doesn't necessarily connect. But I can honor that. That's, you know, joyful and connecting and empowering for them. Like if that, like I can honor that, even though it's not my truth.
Yes.
And like I don't use, you know, substances, and you know some of that is actually within our teachings, and some of it is just because like, as somebody who's in recovery, like my body just doesn't know how to do a little bit, right? So some of this is just a safety thing for my own being. So a lot of my world is like in ceremony. I'm up with the sun, I'm in prayer. You know, I burn medicine in my house daily. It's not uncommon for myself to like smudge myself off or my kids off and have my wings out, sitting with my chanupa, sometimes just myself on the ground, sometimes with others, right? And so all of these things really help me be comfortable with who I am. Like I have at this point no shame on being gender diverse. I don't have any shame in my sexuality. Like I don't have any, like I'm a proud two-spirit person. You know, I rock our flag. I rock our, like, you know, my tribal, you know, flag as well. I do both. Like, you know, I definitely have to be mindful because I have light skin privilege. So a lot of times in some of the work that I do, I really try to create more space for other folks, because I think with having light skin privilege, sometimes people, especially white folk, will like go to me because like I look more familiar and I'm more apt to like find somebody from like the Muwekma tribal like folks to like represent versus me, because this isn't even like my tribal land, right?
Yeah,
like, I'm totally Klamath Falls. Like I'm on the river, you know that.
Yeah,
like,
my folks are in New Mexico. Like,
right?
Why are you asking me to do your land acknowledgement?
Yeah.
Ask the tribe. And now, just so you all know, I learned about this process most recently. Is that Muwekma Ohlone tribe? They have their own website. I think it's muwekmaohlone.org. I could be wrong. We'll put the proper link up here above. But on their website, you go to community education or education, I think. It's one of their tabs, and you'll drop down to that, and then you can request a land acknowledgement or a education session from the Muwekma Ohlone, and they do ask for a donation to their organization, just as, you know, gentle thank you, and just for having them come out. It's, you know, we normalize for having guest speakers or like keynote speakers, you know, giving them like a stipend of like maybe 100 to like, depending on what they're talking about and how many people they're talking, like 2,000. It's like, it really, we're normalizing that, but you're not going to normalize compensating somebody for their time for them to recognize the land that you're on is their land to a big group of folks. So that was an interesting process that I just learned about. Previously, I would just like shoot an email to like these folks in the Muwekma Ohlone community and like, hey, please help. I've been asked to do a land acknowledgement, but I don't feel comfortable just because, again, our tribes aren't from here.
Not our land, not our people's land. Yeah. And the Muwekma people right now are actually doing a lot to become federally recognized. So I really encourage folks to follow them on social media. Marissa can also add a link here because I think it's Muwekma Ohlone. I think that's how you just follow them. But they're doing a lot. They're going to city council in San Jose. They're currently doing the trail of truth. So they're walking from San Francisco, I think, all the way to DC.
Oh, wow.
But doing a lot to really try to empower the tribe, empower them with different rights. And some of that is really focusing on the federal recognition right now. So shout out to the Mulekma people. May you be able to receive the care that you deserve. And thank you for letting us be on your land.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, and it's interesting. I was on a board for a while for a queer board that does a lot of events, and they were they wanted a blessing of a space. And so I asked Canyon from Indian Canyon, kind of a well-known native two-spirit person in the Bay Area, to come out. And one of the things they were surprised about, which I'm surprised they were surprised coming from me, when they came to do it, I offered tobacco and monetary, and handed to them in a customary way. So it's 4 times for the 4 directions before placing it into their hand. Because I think it's really important that we provide equal compensation for people's care and time, and I think a lot of times people want to do a land acknowledgement right now because it's like politically correct versus really having a connection of why that acknowledgement is important. What does that mean? What does it mean to be, an ally? What does it mean to be like really empowering those folks versus just doing something because it looks good? So anyways.
Yeah. It's been a fun time. And I also, just in case you all are wondering, for those of you who might be listening that are a part of like corporate world, and there was a friend of mine who, for the beginning of every meeting they had, they did a land acknowledgement. And I was like, for every meeting that you had, like 2 meetings a week, and you're saying the land acknowledgement twice, like, how does that make sense? And what is the purpose behind them? What are you doing for the Native community, that you want to honor so badly? And so they did have an Indigenous person, a part of their company. I'm not going to name names, but they just help them understand that, these land acknowledgements, they're important, but they might not need to take place in every single staff meeting that takes, she was just saying, she didn't understand, why they were doing that. And it just felt very performative. And so now at their company, they made it a standard to have it for openings, for big community events. And not so much meetings. And because she was like, why? And because, she was the native in their group, they were always asking her, and she's like, this is not my place, this is not my land. What? Yeah. Just tell me the why. And if you can give me the why and it's meaningful, I got you. But if there's no why, there's no meaning, what is the point? And so it was just interesting to hear how they advocated for themselves, and also staff meetings that are that often, that frequency with the same folks continuously. It's not necessary. And
I'm really big on, it's not so much in our words, right, but it's in our actions. So, how are we including, tribal folk into our spaces? How are we giving back to the, tribes of the land that we are standing on, right? How are we connecting and serving? And that's what I really look at. That was one of the things when, even when we started partnering with Indian Health Center at the Q Corner for the Two-Spirit Lunch, I originally was going to this Two-Spirit Lunch because I wanted to connect and have a meeting and be like, all right, what are things we can do? I'm a government employee, right? And so as a government employee, there's a separation of church and state, right? And so in my great mind, I was like, oh, we'll give access to do ceremony and stuff, but that's not really my hat. My hat is a mental health professional that provides services, and I can point people to the right direction. And so when we went and we were talking, it just so happened that we were able to have the Two-Spirit Lunch at, the Q Corner, right? And be able to host it and be able to, create the space and offer other services for folks when they come in. But a lot of times it's looking at how do we connect services? It's why, the Q Corner has the Mosaic BIPOC group that meets twice a month, and it's specifically to really create that space, that meaningful space for peers to be able to connect that are in the Black and Indigenous and people of color communities, right? Like, and so we really try to not just say the things, right? Not just have the flyer, not just have paintings that are representing Two-Spirit folk. If you look at our community painting, it actually has somebody holding a sign that says Native Land that we slid in there with the artist. But it's really like, how are we actually providing those services, right? Like, how are we connecting people? How do we connect them to Indian Health Center when they come in and they don't have any, insurance, right? And like really making sure that like we're doing that work so that we can actually be of service, not just lip service.
Yes.
And I think a lot of folks right now are really good at the lip service.
Preach. Don't talk about it, be about it.
Yeah.
So just for funsies, we have our Indian Health Center. We have Two-Spirit group. We have two of them. One is online for folks who are like homebound or might have moved away but still want to stay connected with the community. Our other one is in person, and it's most recently moved to the Q Corner. So the online one is every third Tuesday of the month. The in-person one is every third Thursday of the month. And what's funny is this month is the third Thursday falls before the third Tuesday, so the online group won't be until the following week. So it's a fun time. But both groups are very fun. I feel like the in-person one I like a little bit more, even though I host the online.
Well, we have food.
That's why. It's because they have food. Food is the way to my heart. If you want me to like you, feed me. I don't know.
So that means send snacks.
Yes.
We're sending snacks to
urgently.
You.
Yeah. As soon as I get grumpy, my boyfriend is just like, did you eat? And I'm like, no.
I get the same.
Yeah. So if I'm grumpy, it's like, okay, let's get you a snack.
Let's get a snack.
Yeah. And if I haven't eaten and I'm out and about and doing things, he's like, world, watch out. So it's a fun time. But yeah, so in person, you get fed. Online, you get fed knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is just as valuable. Yeah, you can have a snack while you're in the meeting. That's fine too. I just won't provide it for you here. Sorry. So how can organizations like the Q Corner and others better support Two-Spirit and queer Indigenous people?
I think just really creating that space, one, like in representation, right? So when it comes to hiring, when it comes to your media, when it comes to, the posts, the pamphlets, like really putting in Indigenous folks so that there's representation visually. And that's like media, that's staff, and then really making sure there's space within the programming. So for us, one of the things we did was partner with, you all at Indian Health Center and having that lunch space, right? So we're being very intentional on who we're partnering with. We're being very intentional on creating space for folks to come safely and be able to be in community. And then even with the peer-led support group for 18 and over, the Mosaic group, which also meets once a month online and once a month in person, and that's also for accessibility. Making sure that there's representation with staff that are available, so they're going to see themselves, and then having that place for people to come and be able to connect, right? And I think that's true for really any space. It's, are you hiring Indigenous folk? Do you even know if you have Indigenous folk? Do you know what land you're on, right? These are things that should be done, aren't often done. And, if you're a huge, giant corporation that often has different funds to donate to nonprofits with tax write-offs for when you do it, are you being intentional with that money, right? Are you putting it back into the tribes that are on the land? Are you serving in whatever, capacity? Because we're in tech world. Tech world has a crap ton of money, right? And those are things that they can do, right? And I don't know that it's often being done. And I think it's because, as a government, which is kind of hard as an employee, but we stole the land and then we eradicated the people and then we tried to cover it up, right? And in that process and in that that trauma, it's still very much there. I think now there's some shift, at least in the lip service, which I think is good because my children growing up have had very different teachings than I did. I was all ready to flip some tables over, in the school system. And I found that they were going to different field trips, that were specific to Ohlone land acknowledgement, and Ohlone people were like running it, and they were getting information of the original people of the school the land was on, like very different. Like that is now the history book I learned as my children's age was different. So I do think there's some shifting in the education, and now it's really, how do we empower those people? How do we give access to land back, right? How do we create spaces where people can pray safely? How do like parks actually have spaces where Indigenous folks can actually have an NEP or other ceremonies on the like park land? And I think we're a far cry from there, but I'm deeply grateful for the work that we do, at the collective, at the Q Corner, because we're really, really intentional on actually not just saying the things, but creating the space, having it in the art, having it in our media, having it in our groups, having it within our staff.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference even as like a two-spirit person. Like I'm not just the person they ask questions on definitions. I am the person that they're also like checking in on, like, how does this feel for me as a two-spirit person? What is the impact? Because this work has impact, right?
Yes.
And I can't say that I've had that experience. I've worked in mental health for 10 plus years, and I can't say I've had that anywhere else. So I'm grateful I have it now, and I'm also grateful to know it exists, how it can exist. So, we're always growing as a team. We're always learning, and then being able to provide those same things to other spaces.
Yeah, I like that really in-depth answer, only because like you see the importance of like organizations like the Q Corner, like Indian Health Center, just any corporation in general, and just valuing their staff, making sure that they're seen, and that if they're gonna say something to lip service, that they actually do something. Maybe donate to the McMilloney tribe or whichever tribal land that you're on, because not everybody listening is in San Jose on this podcast. But it's impactful to learn like what can we do, and just like slowly building those roads to get there.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I felt a kinship with Q Corner because like IHC, we started our two-spirit group in 2019. So like right before the pandemic, we're doing really cool in-person lunches, and then we had to switch in the pandemic to doing like more online stuff. But it was just like, how can we be intentional? We were doing our research. We were reaching out to BATES, the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirit organization here. And just like to learn like what can we do, what do you do, and just kind of like common practices, terminology. And so it was a fun, informational and intentional time at the beginning of like the two-spirit group being founded by myself and Stephanie Reynolds, who's now doing the in-person lunch. I thought that was so awesome, along with Valerie Monteros, who's also the other counterpart to Steph for the in-person lunch. And we're always meeting and just continuing to be like, okay, how can we better serve the community? What are things that we can do to make sure that people are seen? So it's really nice to hear that, the other ways that corporations and companies can help is maybe by just making space for one, two, being intentional with like a donation of their funds, or just making space in general. So
yeah,
nice.
Definitely. And I think it's, important to just acknowledge in this that, two-spirit, those words are new. They're newer for each, tribe. There have been different words, right, that have existed, whereas two-spirit is kind of like a word that is trying to unify all the tribes, right, and those teachings, and acknowledging, and that there's even, more and more I'm seeing at powwows, like having a little portion where there's one coming up that some friends of mine are on a powwow drum. They'll be drumming, and they took a picture, and it said something along the lines of like, dance in whatever gender you identify with. That's not exact words, but it was something of that nature. And there is like growth even within like our Indigenous communities, right? Like and in powwows and stuff to really like kind of include, honor two-spirit folks. My uncle was all excited. He doesn't really get it, but he like loves me, and he's like really into like having like two-spirit people at his lodge. Like he's all into it. He's often my fire tender at my own, and he sent me a video at the what is it? All Nations Gathering. I feel like I'm saying
Gathering of Nations.
Thank you. And but the beginning included like a shout out like to Two Spirit folks, and there was like the rainbow Two Spirit flag that came out in the procession, and I was like, look at us, like, and that did not happen prior, right? And so there's like, I think even our own tribal nations are starting to create space, right? Like slowly but surely.
Yeah, and I think the Gathering of Nations, it actually takes place in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Shout out, New Mexico. Tahajali is like right next door. But yeah, it takes place in around April in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So if you folks are interested in attending Gathering of Nations, I'll also throw up their flyer. They are already advertising for next year. They're ready, and it's again one of the biggest powwows in the nation. I think it's definitely worth checking out, and they have a really cool like native DJ set, and I'm just like, this is amazing. So I'm excited to attend for 2025. What are some common misconceptions about Two-Spirit identities, and how do you think we can start to break these stereotypes? And I have to sneeze. Okay, I went away.
I think a lot of the misconceptions is like really assuming that it's 100% gender or it's 100% sexuality, right? Whereas for a Two-Spirit person, they could be a transgender man and identify as straight, right? And so I think there's a lot of trying to push people into like certain certain categories that don't really exist for them. I think a lot of the misconceptions are very similar to anybody within community, that we're all having sex all the time and we're all doing drugs and that we all hate ourselves and like we don't have families and like that we're like these, unethical like beings, right? Like I see that just as much within like Two-Spirit, indigenous like spaces that I'm in as I do in all the other, just society norms. And I think there's, a lot of that. And I think also there's a misconception that like a Two-Spirit indigenous person that may be by blood may actually be connected to like their tribe or their teachings. And so often because of colonialism, that is not the case, right? Like so many of my folks have never been in ceremony, right? They've not been in ceremony with their elders. They have not been in ceremony on their own, people's land. And so really like, getting to know the person, what their connection is, to the heritage, what their connection is to the teachings, if they have it. And if they don't have it, and it is something that they seek, being able to be knowledgeable enough, right, of like how to connect them to it. But I hear all kinds of like wild, honestly, like totally, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the S word now that I did it, but I did it.
It's okay.
Bleep it out, person, if you need to. Like I've, been told like, oh, you want to be a man, which has never, like for me, that's not true. Or I've like been told that like, I like don't have any kind of like monogamous partnership. And for some people they may be poly, but for me, like I generally am in like monogamous partnerships, and like the assumption that I have like, many other partners, or that I am, unfaithful to my partner, or the assumption that I do a lot of drugs based on being in community, or the assumption that like I don't love myself, right? Like just wild things that I think a lot of folks hear just in general, like the kind of like misinformation of people in community and like the things people have said like throughout the generations that are still present today. But I think like the biggest issue is like the assumptions, right? The assumption of who I am versus asking who I am. The assumption of like, what does it mean to Two-Spirit for me versus the next person? What does it mean to be like a Two-Spirit person in ceremony, and what my experience is versus others. Like I have certain folks that like I tell not to come and support me at Sundance because I know that they won't be held safely and I can't protect them while I'm in the arbor. Right? Like, so I say, like, I love that you want to come and support. I don't think this is going to be the space for you. Right? Because of how people will perceive them walking in because of like trying to push them into like a skirt or different clothing or, you know, all the things that might happen, right? And I can't do anything about it, and I want somebody to be, you know, safe in a good way, and I feel kind of a responsibility to that. And yeah, I think people just make up all kinds of weird things about us queers, like all kinds of just strange, wild things, let alone being like, you know, indigenous. So people like assume I'm, you know, often they assume like we're naked in ceremony, or that like I eat, you know, raw buffalo, which I've definitely drank buffalo blood. I don't think I've ever eaten raw meat. Or just like the weird things people think about natives, right? Like that we're all doing ayahuasca and we're all like running around naked, pounding on powwow drums. Like weird, craziest stuff that I've like heard on both fronts.
Yeah, one of my like favorites, and I say this sarcastically, is my grandpa on my mom's side. So I am also mixed. I'm half Navajo, I'm half Mexican. And my grandpa on my mom's side, the Mexican side, he was just like, so your dad's from the reservation? And I was like, Tahajli, yes. And he's like, so when you visit that side, do you have running water? Or like, do you have to like go to a well? Like, how do you wash? And I was like I do in the city. I mean, they have running water. They had to fight to get running water. Do not get me wrong. And there's all kinds of issues that will pop up on the reservation that will cause them to not have running water. And they'll have to get like lots of cases of like Nestle bringing in like water. It's just crazy. And I was like, but those are like few and far between. Thank goodness. But I was just like, what do you mean do we have running water? I was like, what's wrong with you? And like I took it so offensively, and I was just so mad. And he was like, well, I don't know. And I was like, well, ask questions, and I'm happy that you asked, but also I'm a little mad that you would just assume that because my dad grew up on the reservation that he was somehow less civilized than any other being. Right. And I was just like, and that was from a family member who supposedly loves me. So I was just like,
mine was, so you're going to go pray to rocks? I was like, we don't pray to rocks. We may pray with rocks. We may honor the aunts, which like the grandfathers and grandmothers that come in, but we do not pray to them, right? Or, so you're going to go try to commit suicide? I got that once because most people, when they hear that I go 4 days, no food, no water, are convinced that it's like a death trap. No. And I'm like, nope. Not really the experience I'm having, or they think it's like naked and afraid. Like so many weird things that come out of folks. But like it's definitely with like one part of my family, like it's always like, oh, you pray to a tree, and I was like, I don't pray to a tree. Yeah. Or like, oh, you pray to rocks, and I was like, I don't pray to rocks. Yeah. Like none of us are praying to rocks, and it's just like again, just a wild, you know, assumptions on both fronts, like, you know, from like the queer aspect, two-spirit self of mine, and then like, you know, the indigenous side, like it's just, you know, just a lot of people assuming, right? A lot of people assuming or... Yeah. And even for myself, because I identify as a two-spirit person, and I don't necessarily share that with everybody because, I mean, safety over anything first. And that people will be mad. Like, I've had people be mad at me, and I'm like, why are you angry? And they're like, well, you're two-spirit, quote unquote, but then you have a partner that's a male. And they're like, so how does that work? You're not gay. And I was like, well, regardless of whatever my sexual orientation is, my gender expression, my gender itself is two-spirit, and I'm sorry that makes you mad. Right. And I am in a wonderful relationship with my partner, Juan, and it's been 10 years, and I've, you know, that's just how that is. But not everybody who is two-spirit is, they're in like a heterosexual relationship or they're in a homosexual looking relationship. It really... It runs the gambit, and they might be bisexual, they may be pansexual, and just happen to be, you know, committed to somebody, you know, of the opposite sex or gender, depending. And I think that's what's hard is there's so much there's so much judgment no matter where you go, and so quick to erase different parts of folks, and that like whether you're in a committed relationship or not doesn't take away from like who you are. And I think that's like, again, any group of people, whether it be Indigenous or even like my white family members, like it smells different. It may sound different, but again, like, if we could really actually go back to Homo Takiasan, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are all sacred. We are all connected. We'd be in a better place. But I think that's almost, and I think it's hard to do as humans, but then it's even harder to do when it comes to like the systems of power in place, right? Like those whole systems need to be severely revamped in order for everything to have like any kind of like sense of like sacredness or equality, right? Anyways, I go on a whole different tangent.
Well, thank you. And then the main thing, stereotype to break when it comes to Two-Spirit folks, Indigenous folks, is stop assuming, please, on behalf of, I'm just gonna go with what I am, on behalf of the Cananecito Navajo Nation, please stop assuming that we don't have running water. That might be your experience.
We pray to rocks.
Yes, that too. And so, like, what do you hope to see in the future regarding understanding of Two-Spirit, queer identities in both Indigenous and broader communities?
I think my biggest hope, and this is like from like a personal space, not necessarily professional, but personal, is that we have access to ceremony. Like that there's access to land, there's access to ceremony. There are like those teachings are being brought up and held in a sacred way, so folks can be in community, be along with their family members, be in prayer and ceremony as their whole authentic selves. And so I think that for me is like my deepest desire within my lifetime, which looks like land back, right? It looks like access to the land to be able to do those ceremonies. It looks like, the Moakma people being able to have federal recognition and being able to have more benefits and the needs that they have right now. It looks like less lip service, and it looks like more action. So it looks like more places that have groups for two-spirited folks and partnering with folks who do that work, right? It's looking for more representation within, characters and media and the artists, right? That like we're surrounded by. It really looks like, having the capacity to be seen in like a deep and meaningful way, not just when it looks good, not just like, I can't even tell you during Standing Rock, I did a lot of work out at the camps for media at that time, how many people wanted to talk about clean water. They wanted to talk about what was going out there, but they weren't, they would be holding their Starbucks, but they couldn't like donate money to the people at the camp, right? But you just paid $7 for your damn coffee.
Yeah.
Like, and it's really like asking ourselves, right? Like, where can I show up and give back and create space? And then what spaces do I have where I am empowered, right? Like, I'm a government employee, so I'm empowered, right? Like, I have a voice. There's many different spaces in which just my work life, like I can create those spaces, I can create influence, I can have conversations with folk, encourage those spaces. And then doing so, right, like when folks like come to me and they're asking me to do various things, and I'm like, again, pivoting to the people who do that work, pivoting to the people that, can provide that care, that can provide that benefit. And I think that's really where we all need to look like at ourselves, but also like in our work lives, right? Like, where are we actually creating space?
Yeah. So your hope is that there's space for folks to just be themselves.
Yeah, just be themselves and really be able to be connected to their culture, connected to their people, and be, safe to do so. Like, I think being mixed is very interesting for me because in most of my world I have light skin privilege, right? So I'm looked at as a white person. So I have like all these privileges, right? That like my brothers or my cousins have very wildly different experiences, right? But then in other spaces, because of my light skin, like I'm not necessarily safe, right? Like I have to be real mindful what elder I'm with to like offer that buffer and protection. So people assume that don't assume I'm a white person in a space that I quote unquote shouldn't be. But I think having those two experiences also has given me much more empathy and working knowledge of power dynamics, right? And what it means to create space and take up less space, right? And I think that that should be said for a lot of things when it comes to like, you know, our work and really making sure that like we're creating the space versus it looking good, sounding good. Because in this time of that we live in, it's really good to just like use words, right?
Yeah, well, I'm glad. Well, thank you for sharing that. So at Indian Health Center, so this episode is part of our Culture is Medicine, because we have our IHC podcast, just the regular one, random topics of the month, but this one's Culture is Medicine. So like, how are we tying like our culture into everything that we do? So at Indian Health Center, we believe that culture is medicine. And what does that mean to you?
Culture is medicine. I mean, I think for me, it would be like the way that I walk my teachings in every aspect and every day of my life. I often, you know, there's 4 rounds in an EP, and I always remind people we really are like the 4th, 5th round walking. With every step we take, with every breath we take, that we carry that medicine to wherever we go. And so I hold people, whether I like them, whether they agree with me, whether they're being kind to me, whatever their ethnicity is, like whatever they are, I hold them as sacred and I teach them as such. And that is what I'm taught within my culture to do, right? I am taught to hold care for the spider that freaks me out, right? I will get Issa, shout out to Issa at work, to trap the spider and take it out safely because I am terrified and I don't smush it, right? Like, so like my culture has these teachings of how to show up, like how to walk in a good way, how to walk on the land, you know, gently, how to like walk next to like folks gently, right? And not assume I know what you're going to, and not how to act and respond, right, with violence, whether it be verbal or otherwise, right? These are things that I was taught in my culture, right? And I walk that medicine every day. And sometimes I do it great, pat myself on the back, and other times I am very human and I fail and I have to like make amends and then, you know, find what I need in myself to be right within myself so that I can be right with others, right?
Yeah, that's something that I think we all as humans can do, is better ourselves so that way we react less and judge less and just be there more.
Yeah. Just a shout out to our drop-in center that's open 1 to 5, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Our Two-Spirit Luncheon, that's the third Thursday of every month from 12 to 1. And then really, you know, checking out our peer-led support groups, our Mosaic BIPOC group that serves our Indigenous folks, and our gender affirming care clinic for those with Santa Clara, Medi-Cal, or uninsured in the area. If you're, you know, Two-Spirit, gender diverse in some way, and you're really seeking to get some one-on-one therapy, please check us out. We're actually able to do intakes pretty quickly and be able to connect you with the right therapist for you.
Thank you. And so that's what's going on at the Q Corner, and we'll have all of their flyers and information up above to take a look at. An upcoming event for Indian Health Center is our Chosen Family Gathering that will be taking place in September, on September 7th from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Holiday Inn on 1st Street. Check out our flyer for a little bit more info. If you want to check out more of our events, go ahead and check out the indianhealthcenter.org/events at the link above here to stay up to date. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you like our content, check out our social media. Our handle is @IHC San Jose. Thank you. Bye.